Welcome to the Aerophone Academy podcast with me, Matt Traum.
And I'm Alistair Parnell. Join us each month as we discuss the wonderful world of wind controllers, and you get the very best information and answers to your questions.
The Aerophone Academy podcast is the source for accurate information on wind controllers.
So make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, why not check out www.isacs.academy
and patchmanmusic.com.
Hey, here we are. Matt, hello.
Hello to you. Welcome to the first episode.
Yeah, this is fun, right? We've kind of been talking about this for maybe a month or so, but it's great to actually get going. I'm excited.
I am too. Very excited. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we'll go into all kinds of things, both beginner level and expert level, hopefully, and we've something for everybody.
We've got so much to talk about, right? The only thing is we need to make sure we don't talk too much. So we'll split it into reasonable chunks, maybe about 45 minutes to an hour or so. And hey, but firstly, we should maybe talk about the theme tune, right? Because that was all a little bit kind of like on the spur of the moment.
Absolutely. All these things have to come together, and the artwork and all these, various pieces and how to distribute the podcast. It's a little bit more complicated than I thought. But and all of a sudden we had this idea, we need to have a theme. We need to have a graphic.
Yeah. And we kind of started off sort of thinking maybe we'll do like a Bach kind of invention or something like a duet. And then
two-part, real simple. Yeah, that was the idea.
And then the night after we spoke about that, I just had this tune going around in my head, and it's one of those things, I just needed to get up in the morning and just kind of play it on the piano and just make sure I'd kind of worked it out right in my head. And then I recorded like a real kind of basic, just two-part version and sent it over to you. Now you kind of, said, this is going to work. And so I did a few more tracks, but then you did your magic. I mean, what did you add? So I did like a couple of synth tracks, and I did a little bit of a harmony part in there as well. So all of these sounds came from the AE30, right? Was that what you were on, the 30?
Yes, absolutely. AE30. Of course, any of these sounds could be on the AE20 as well, with no difference.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make a point to use the AE30 only for this. So as you listen to it, there's lots of different types of sounds. There's acoustic sounds. There's very synthetic sounds. Even the drums and bass, there's a little bit of a kind of a take 6 bass in there. If you listen in headphones, you can hear it. It's kind of hard to hear on the phone, but so it goes from full synthetic to very acoustic, I think.
Yeah.
And we wanted to kind of make a point that that's all wind controller, and we didn't use any keyboards or any plugins or anything like that. It was all recorded live as well. And I don't think I did too much as far as quantizing either. It's kind of a live thing, live feel.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, so maybe we should just kind of listen to that again now. And so now everyone knows what happened with that recording. Let's just play it again so they can hear it without the voiceover thing, and they can hear the track.
So it sounds quite a bit different with just the music, eh?
It does. I just really liked what you did with it, Matt. It was kind of fun, when you just played it. And the funny thing you said was it kind of had a kind of Pat Metheny kind of vibe to it. And in my head, that's kind of where I started off with that tune idea. It kind of is a little bit reminiscent of James, right? Which I know is one of your favorite tracks as well.
Absolutely, I love that piece. So I was working with it, and like you say, the original idea was maybe a simple 2-part Bach duet type thing with left and right channel, and then I said, well, let me try this. We started adding things, and I like it, and about halfway through when I was doing it, I said, this kind of sounds like Pat Metheny a little bit. So
Yeah.
I put a couple Pat Metheny type sounds in there. There's a Pat Metheny guitar, which is, I believe, one of the presets. But I think you did that one, Alistair.
I think I might have done, or I certainly did one of them. I'm not sure. You might have done an electric kind of guitar thing as well. There's quite a lot of patches, right, for the Aerophones now. It's difficult to keep track of them.
A little bit of Lyle Mays sound in there.
Yeah.
The drums actually are part of the AE20 and AE30 factory sounds also. So you can go in, there's a full drum kit in there and they sound fantastic. So that's playable. Of course, the bass. And you, I believe, on one of the tracks was a harmony you're using the intelligent harmony feature now?
Exactly right. It was the intelligent harmony, just in D major. I just set it to a sixth and I kind of just worked out the way through it to just keep it within that same sixth range for each chord change. And yeah, it came out great. I'm really, really pleased with it.
I like it too. I hope folks like it. So that was fun. And that was you did it one night and I think I finished it off the next day or thereabouts.
One of those things that just fell into place really nicely. It was great. Good.
Yeah. Great job on the composition, by the way. It's very nice little piece.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And great job on the mixing.
I was very impressed that you did that so quickly.
It just came to mind and I couldn't sleep and I just wrote it down and that was that,
Yeah, he sent me a complete 2-part scored out piece PDF and made it very easy.
So I was thinking, this first episode, obviously, there's a long way to go. I'm sure we're going to cover a huge amount of stuff in these, at the moment, once monthly podcasts. And it might be a good idea to begin with, we thought, to just give the listeners a little bit of a background of how we both got into music and how we got into wind synths. Might just be nice for people to know where we started. So shall I start? I'll start, okay? So my background is I came from a musical family. My parents were both accordion teachers. And so there was music in our house literally 24/7. I mean, it was there was so many pupils in and out that door. It was a busy place, but I was just totally absorbed in music, basically, literally from birth, because I was born in that house. And so my parents both taught accordion and some piano. My dad started me off on the piano. That was my first instrument. I was about 5, I think. And, we didn't really have any kind of sit-down lessons very much. He used to give me a little piece of music every now and then. I was hearing these pieces all the time. I knew how they should sound, and he'd keep a track on my fingering and stuff. And after a while, what would I be, about 9? They got me a clarinet. Now, I started the clarinet, and it didn't last very long before I got a little bit bored with it. In fact, I tell you a little funny story. I'd been playing maybe for 18 months or 2 years, and I was going to this teacher. I really wasn't enjoying it. And it was this one kind of cold winter night, and it was dark. And my mom and I were walking home from this clarinet lesson, and I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I hate this, And she was like, no, you should keep going. And I was getting really stroppy. Believe this, I actually threw my clarinet in its case over a garden wall, right?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
You were definitely finished with that, huh?
So then my mom has to go to the door of this house and sort of say, do you mind if we look in your back garden, because my son's thrown his clarinet over the wall
amongst the carrots and the tomatoes?
Yeah, we had to go digging around in this bush, at the back, and oh dear, very embarrassing. So, I was bad with that. I didn't get on well, and they got me a saxophone probably a couple of years later. And, basically, I didn't really do very well at school in very much else. I played the piano, I could play the saxophone, but most of the other subjects I wasn't great at. And so it kind of came, look, what am I going to do? Well, okay, I do a bit of music. That's the best choice, right? So I just went with it and stuck with it. Of course, I'm really glad I did because, I'm sure you feel the same way. To be kind of involved in something you feel is such a joy to do, and it's it doesn't feel like a job. But
And mom and pop were insistent on trying again with you, right? Was it their choice to bring that saxophone home, or did you say, "Hey, I want to try that"?
yeah, absolutely, no, it was their choice. But they never pushed. I can never remember them pushing me. But by the time I got to about 14, I had pretty much decided I'm going to go for this, and I got pretty into it then. I was staying at home practicing when my mates were out, kind of doing whatever sometimes. And
Well, what influenced you? Why did you want to play? Was it the music you were listening to, or
yeah, I think with all that music going on in my house, I didn't really listen to much other music at that stage, but there was so much music going along in the house. And my family had a family band, and they would go out and do gigs, and it would be kind of like different themed evenings. They would do like a French evening or a Spanish evening or a German evening, and my dad would write out all this music to be appropriate for each theme. And after a while, I saw the opportunity that I could actually join the family band and play in the band. And that was the start of my performing, really, right? Probably from about kind of 16, 17. I'm sure we'll hear from you as well about this, but, I also was very fortunate to go to an excellent, in the UK, we would call it sixth form college. It's when you're like 17, 18, right? And we had some great teachers there. I don't know about you, but sometimes, you look back and you just realize you didn't quite appreciate just how good they were until maybe some years later. But we had great teachers. I was very fortunate there.
wow, it makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then I was very lucky. I got into classical saxophone playing big time. Went to the Royal College of Music in London. That's kind of right opposite the Royal Albert Hall. Most people will have seen the Royal Albert Hall in London, the big round concert hall. I was right opposite there, and what a place to go to for 3 years to study music, where some of the great composers have been to that place. And that was an amazing opportunity to go study there. And so, basically fast forward and, what I do now is mostly teaching. I do a fair amount of gigs, playing anything from one-to-one to, I've played with some of the top orchestras in this country, doing classical saxophone solos like Pictures from an Exhibition and that kind of thing, Bolero, all those things. Bizet l'Arlésienne suite, that features saxophone. And then I run my own... it's actually a 9-piece saxophone group. And they're called Equinox. You can see them on YouTube, but there's a bit of Equinox on YouTube and stuff. And, that's a nice bunch of people. And we do anything from Bach to jazz arrangements, And it's brilliant. And then I'm teaching at home. And as you know, I've got into my kind of content creation quite a lot in the last couple of years particularly, so that keeps me busy. Anyway, enough about me. What about you, Matt? Tell us your kind of brief history.
Well, I started trumpet was my first instrument, and there was no second option there. I mean, I wanted to be Herb Alpert and Al Hirt. We talked about it a little bit in when you interviewed me, my background. But that was a big inspiration, just hearing the sound of the Tijuana brass and Al Hirt playing Java and those pop hits. They were actual pop hits that were on the radio at the time in the should we date ourselves? Early 60s.
Yeah.
But that was sort of I would say towards the end of any kind of instrumental music that made the charts. There were a few odd ones like Mangione with Feels So Good and Herb Alpert with Rise, maybe a couple Kenny G things, later in the later decades. But yeah, I mean, that was more common back in the earlier days. So I guess I'm glad I caught the tail end of that and was able to hear that. My parents used to play a lot of good music at the house. And I guess I suppose they played Herb Alpert, and that was it. I had to, but I had to wait until 5th grade here in the U.S. That's usually when the band instruments start.
Uh-huh.
So that would be what maybe 12 years old.
Right.
something like that, fifth grade. So they start, sometimes the stringed instruments start a year earlier in fourth grade.
Right.
But for us, the brass, I knew exactly what I wanted to play. I had some friends who were a year older than me. They both played trumpet, and I just couldn't wait to start. So that was that. And then I ended up going to. Well, I had a great high school. I talked a little bit about James Warwick.
Yes.
In high school, he was a great teacher and went on to do great things at a place called New Trier High School up by Chicago.
And you did some trombone, didn't you? Did you do some trombone?
Yeah, in high school, we needed trombone in the marching band, and I had a friend. I'll mention his name, Blake Schlabach. But anyway, he was a big inspiration in high school. He also played trumpet. He was in the drum corps, and a very advanced player. He was well into college level, even in high school. So I played trombone for a couple years in the middle there. In secondary instrument, I still played the trumpet all the way through, but I kind of taught myself that instrument and
right.
Played a little in one of the jazz bands on that, as well as trumpet. And we had a couple jazz bands in high school, believe it or not. There was actually 2 full big bands in our high school. Our poor director, Jim Warwick, was there Monday night and Wednesday night for one band, and Tuesday and Thursday for the other band. And then, Fridays sometimes it was marching band and, the games. And oh my God, I don't know how these teachers do this. They just give their lives to us.
But, I sometimes wonder these guys, I just hope they realize how much and how many people they've influenced, right? Because look at the amount of people that they've influenced by giving us those opportunities when we were that age. It's just incredible.
And it multiplies out too. You've influenced geometric numbers of people.
Yes.
And
yes.
So it's just one person made a massive difference in the world. It's really amazing.
Yeah. It is.
So then I went to college and studied music. At first, I was in music education, and I kind of decided I didn't really want to go that direction. Decided I wanted to get into audio recording. So I changed schools, ended up at Ohio State University here, huge school here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And the audio recording program was a little bit too much math for me. So I changed again, and I ended up with a degree in jazz studies.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was happy to get something and move on. And then out of college, I worked in a recording studio doing some editing and dubbing of tapes for radio, mostly radio stations. They went out all over the country. And during that time, I was playing in all occasion bands, weddings, dances, country clubs.
Yeah.
Whatever, what have you.
Similar to what I was doing, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And doing that, and eventually kind of led my own group that was like that for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Playing bass guitar, playing trumpet, singing, a little bit of keyboards, just kind of doing a lot of things.
Sure.
Arranging. And during that time in 1985, I started Patchman Music, which I still am doing now, this many years later.
Yes. Which is the first time I knew of you. Through Patchman,
yes. So that started out as a sound design company, just doing patches for keyboards, like the old Casio CZ101 and the Korg Poly 800. Those were my first 2 that I believe I worked on, and then later the DX7 and things. But eventually, I got into wind controllers in the late 80s, around 1989, and kind of specialized in that, even though I still do the other keyboard type things as well. I'm still doing that and developing sounds, and both of us are helping consult with some big companies on commercial wind controllers, and trying to help the cause, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and having a lot of fun on the way, right? It's been great.
Oh yeah, it's enjoyable. I really love the instrument, and maybe we could talk a little bit about why would somebody want to play a wind controller? I guess that's an important thing. Might be a good place to start.
Well, even before that, what is a wind controller, right?
Yeah, right. What is a wind controller?
Yeah.
I would say it's an electronic instrument, generally electronic. I guess it's always electronic. That is fingered like an acoustic instrument, such as a saxophone or trumpet.
Yep.
And it's basically electronic, and it would be either controlling an external synthesizer through a MIDI connection or a USB connection or wireless. And that could be on a MIDI synthesizer, a MIDI module, or even a soft synth that runs on a computer, or all the way down to an iPhone or an Android these days.
Yes, yes.
And some wind controllers, of course, have built-in sounds, built-in synthesizer inside the instrument. Those are the later instruments have these now.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I know your history of all of this is probably way more in depth than mine, but I'm right in saying, aren't I, that so it was Nyle Steiner that first, experimented with basically the breath control.
And interestingly enough, even though woodwind type wind controllers are seemingly the most popular and abundant these days, the first wind controller that he made was a brass type wind controller called the EVI, which is an electronic valve instrument. And it was only several years later that the woodwind players wanted him to make a version for them, which he later called the EWI or EWI, or electronic wind instrument, or woodwind instrument, electronic woodwind instrument.
Yes.
And of course, on the other camp, there was if you're looking at maybe the first commercial wind controllers, the other camp would be Bill Bernardi's Lyricon, which I actually possibly came out even a little earlier than the Nyle Steiner EVI.
Right.
Lyricon, I don't know the exact year. Maybe I can see it here. I would say maybe 73, 74. Does that sound about right?
Right. Yeah.
The Lyricon one?
Sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. But as we've discussed before, not a lot of people knew about them back then, right? It was a pretty small community. So it's been quite a time then, so I first got into a Yamaha WX7, I believe, in about 1985.
So just to back you up, the WX7 would have probably been 87 or so.
Okay,
that's when it came out, I believe.
Right.
Late 87, maybe 88. So
yep. But I can remember knowing of the early Akai models then, but I don't think they were easily available here in the UK. At least I never saw any. So my first experience of the wind controller was actually a WX7. That was my first experience.
Yeah, that's probably not surprising. Yamaha is a huge company and has a big reach worldwide, maybe a lot more than Akai did at that time. So yeah, I remember, going to stores here about that time, maybe 1988 or so, when the EWI 1000 and EVI 1000 came out.
Yeah.
Same time as the WX7. Basically, they all came out about the same year. 1987 was the year.
Right.
But I remember going to a store, and I remember seeing one time I saw somebody, one of the stores had an EVI 1000. I think that's probably my only connection to any wind controller. Like you say, even over here, it wasn't very widely distributed.
No.
And of course, there was no internet.
That's right.
The only way you could know about it would be through Keyboard Magazine or Electronic Musician Magazine, or the Sax magazines.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then you go to a store and you look at this thing, and nobody knows what it is. Chances of finding a salesman there or saleswoman that could play it are almost zero.
Exactly.
And then who's going to want to put it in their mouth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, really hard sell without YouTube.
I mean, sadly, in terms of the possibility of finding someone in a store even now, it's still pretty unlikely you'll find anybody that knows very much about it or would be able to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Even now, it's pretty much the same deal. It's guitar players and keyboard players. So thank God for YouTube. And some of the internet groups, because that's probably how most people learn about it, unless they go out and see a group that has somebody playing one.
Yeah. And so, fast forward now, what are we? So we've got maybe 6 or 7 different aerophones, if you include the kind of Japanese or
different
Chinese
colored versions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, it's quite a few. Kind of amazing.
We've got the EWI 4000, 5000, and the Solo. Oh, there's the USB as well. EWI
USB, the Solo. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we've got other things like the Silphio, which has been pretty successful. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people have done that. And then the Berglund Instruments, of course, has been taken very seriously by players as well. That seems to be very well received. And we probably missed out one, that synthophone, right? The soft wind
Yes.
synthephone.
Martin Herney in Switzerland, Bern, Switzerland.
Yeah.
He's been developing the synthophones since, I would say, since MIDI came out. He was one of the early pioneers in this field. Really great guy. I've gotten to know him pretty well over the years. And yeah, the synthephone, he wrote his own code, and it's basically an actual alto saxophone that he puts electronics inside of, and he puts Hall sensor, magnetic type sensors in the switches, in the keys to control the MIDI, and then it just puts a MIDI signal out, and then you connect it to a synth or a soft synth.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's one of the pioneers as well. We should give him credit for sure. But it's funny, if you look at the companies, it was mostly Akai and Yamaha for decades, and then Roland really came in big time, with their Aerophone, and they went from nothing to having, I would say, maybe the kind of the lead in the field right now.
Yeah.
So those three, and then the rest of the field is more, it's like homebrew type projects like Berglund and Martin Herney's synthephone, soft wind synthephone.
But it almost seemed to me that when Roland got going with the Aerophones, it seemed to kind of bring things to the fore again, and we started to see more, as you say, smaller companies coming out with their wind instruments as well. So in the last kind of 6 years or 7 years or so, there seems to have been quite an explosion, right? There's been a lot of activity, and it's been really nice to see. And I think the communities work very well. There's a lot of enthusiasm out there. And I know that, one of the reasons for us to do this podcast is that, along with more people getting into the wind synthesizers, it can be difficult for people to find, the right information, correct information. Sometimes people in Facebook pages and things, they can get really excited and, they've maybe found something that might just work for them or something. But, to get really good information, that's partly why we decided to do this podcast, isn't it? So hopefully we can make things clear for people. And we're going to encourage, the listeners to, send us questions as well. We'll leave some details where you can get in touch with us. And part of the podcast will be that, you'll be able to ask us questions, and we'll do our best to answer them as accurately and as fully as we can, and hopefully no, let's say, slightly confusing comments that you sometimes can get on the internet pages.
Yeah, that was sort of our idea when we first talked about it. We were looking at the forums, and we see a lot of misinformation or old information or incorrect information, and we wanted to have a place to go where somebody, not to toot our horn too much, but we could kind of know what they're talking about. We could actually hopefully answer the questions with an accurate answer. Yeah. And kind of dispel some of the rumors and the false,
absolutely
false stories that are out there. So yeah, we're hoping that this will be a place that people can come and get some real good advice and information, and hopefully be a very enjoyable experience. And we hope to do this. We plan to do this every month.
Sure. Yeah.
And
it'll be great.
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit to what you were saying about the companies. And I have noticed, like you say, in the last, let's say maybe 3 years, there's been an explosion of more or less Chinese type wind controllers. Have you noticed that? I can name, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 companies now that are making wind controllers to various levels of quality, let's say.
Yes.
Some are missing some very critical things that, which we can talk about at some point, because I think that can be a big problem if somebody says, "Oh, I want to buy that wind controller. It's only $180, brand new," and they get it, and it sounds horrible, and there's no expression, and the keys don't have a fingering deglitch algorithm in it, so you're getting all these bad notes in between your scale, and there's no bite sensor, so you can't do vibrato. And, it's almost better. Well, it's usually better to spend a little more money and get something that's properly designed.
You've certainly got to do your research carefully, right? So it's some digging on the internet. There's a fair bit on YouTube, and And again, hopefully this will be a place where people can glean some information if they're thinking about going into a wind synthesizer, or, if they already play. Hopefully we're going to be talking about things that will interest the kind of seasoned player as well.
Yeah, and hopefully we can point out some of the things that, we don't want to badmouth, we're not here to badmouth any,
no, absolutely not,
companies or any products or anything, but there are things that are kind of important. And we can at least point out and say, okay, you can buy this and get it. And it's, you can learn a little bit and maybe move on to something more.
Sure.
Or you can save your pennies and spend $50 more and get something that's going to last you maybe another 5 years over this original device that's just, really super basic.
Sure.
So that's something we can talk about, and why maybe something like the Aerophone 20, AE20 or AE30 are why they're such a good choice. They're just so powerful.
Yeah, because they're so expandable, right? I mean, there's all those tone packs, and I mean, there's a whole heap of sounds in there to begin with. You can get into the editor, and yeah, it's just like you're never going to run out of stuff you can do on something like an Aerophone.
Yeah, and hopefully we can point out what that is that's important, and why they, of course, they cost a little bit more money than these
sure.
Bottom of the line ones, but there's a reason for that, and in the long run, it's well worth it in my opinion. I always tell people when they're, hey, what should I buy? And I say, well, what's your budget? And I say, well, come back to me in 6 months. Save your pennies, can come back when you have a little bit more, and you'll be happier.
Sure.
Because if you get something that's just unsatisfying to play, that could turn you off permanently from the instrument and say, these things are horrible. I don't want to play one of these. They sound bad. They don't respond. And that's it, whereas you could have, with proper guidance and a proper instrument, you could end up with something that's very satisfying and you could play for the rest of your life.
Sure.
So that's my goal, is to help people, understand that. And
absolutely. And that leads us nicely on to, why would somebody want to play a wind synth in the first place? I mean, there's the obvious, it looks kind of interesting to people. It's, there's a lot of possibilities in terms of, for me, it was very much, it actually crossed my interest. So something like a WX7, when I first started playing it kind of had a saxophone-like layout for the keys, but it also, it had all the kind of internal kind of synth sound. No, it wasn't internal on a WX7. You had a module, right? But it had the possibility to make those cool synth sounds, which as a saxophone player, we didn't have kind of access to that like maybe a keyboard player could do. But of course, the main thing about it had that extra control, the breath controller, which, we're going to talk about that in a little while, why that's so important. But it just makes things so much more expressive. And that's sometimes, where some of those cheaper wind synths don't do so well. They don't have the bite and breath control, right? But so primarily for me, it was about accessing more sounds. It was cool that I could, play a violin or an organ, or, one of the first demos I remember hearing, it was WX7, and it was Sal Galena, right? Have I got the name right?
Yes, Sal Galena was actually the consultant to Yamaha that designed the WX7. So that's why that instrument is so good, and it still holds up today.
Yeah.
So many years later, it's 13 plus 24, 37 years later.
Yeah.
That instrument is still viable, and no problem with it if you can find one that works properly.
Yeah.
But it was designed by somebody who played saxophone and understood electronics, and so you have a great instrument. Yeah.
And his demo, I remember him doing a demo with like an electric guitarist, and they were kind of trading phrases. It just blew me away. I was just, I couldn't sit still watching this thing. It was some kind of trade show that they were doing in London, I think. And I managed to get there to see it. And wow, that was it. I was absolutely sold from that moment.
Well, that'll inspire anybody. So you actually saw Sal Galena live then,
I did.
Oh,
and it was just blew me away. It was great.
I've heard all kinds of great things about him. I actually made a tribute page to him. If you just search out Sal Galina, it's spelled Sal, and then Galina is, I believe it's Gallina, Galina. And then Sal Galina tribute or Sal Galina Patchman music, it'll come up in Google and you can see the page. And I actually have those audio demos on that page, so you can read about him and hear those demos that you're talking about that he did on some of the old Yamaha TX sound modules. I think he was using the TX81Z at the time.
That's the one I started with.
Mm-hmm.
We had to load sounds in from a cassette, didn't we?
Yep. That was one way to do it. You could do it cassette. You could do a MIDI dump into it too. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Or type them in by hand if you want to really do it the hard way.
Those were the days. So what about other reasons why you would play a wind synth?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's one of the top questions on my. I should mention anybody that's interested in learning about wind controllers. I have a really nice wind controller FAQ page. Again, just search out wind controller FAQ. It'll probably show up at the top of the Google. You could put Patchman in there if you want to.
Yeah, there's a load of material on there.
There might be some others.
It's great.
But this is a huge document. But one of the top questions is why play a wind controller. So. And I get asked this a lot when I talk to potential customers, and there's a list there. One of, like you mentioned, I think the top reason was to just have alternative sounds.
Yep.
A sax player standing there playing with a dance band. There's not a saxophone in every song.
Yeah.
So what's he or she to do? Play tambourine, I guess, or you can get a wind controller and you could play a clarinet part, or you can play a little brass section in the background, a chord maybe, or even take over for the bass and let the bass player sing or whatever. So
or a string line, yeah,
a nice string line.
Yeah.
It's a little tricky to do section type sounds. People always ask, "Oh, I want to be a horn section," and it's like, well, you can do that in unisons or octaves, but to do it with chords is a little tricky. It can be done,
yes,
but you have to really dig in to be able to do that type of thing. But if you're just thinking like a unison type horns or octaves, works great with the proper sounds. I have a list of several here. We could maybe just touch on it. But folks, if you want to check the FAQ, we go into detail on that.
Yeah.
Another one was just to provide alternatives to prospective employers. So say you have a little jazz quartet like I did. I had a jazz trio, jazz quartet, even a jazz duo.
Yeah.
And you could say, hey, we can play for your wedding. We can play for the dinner before the main band comes in, and I can do flute, I can do a trumpet and a little acoustic guitar sound, and the keyboard player will play the keyboards.
Exactly.
And so we have this wide range of product that we can offer. So that makes you more marketable, and you can make a better living. Let's say,
and
playing music.
Musical theatre is another one, right? Because very often now, musical theatre bands, they're maybe trying to go to smaller number of players, and they tend to have more keyboard players. Well, if you're going to have to go down that route, to occasionally play an odd oboe line or, a tiny bit of piccolo, or sometimes, you can actually put that in pretty successfully as long as you get the balance and settings right. Mm-hmm.
There's some tricks to that we can get go into in future episodes.
You can make a good job of it, and I've had people sitting in wind bands and things where they've been filling in like a kind of contrabassoon part or something, and those things, they can be pretty successful.
Well, that kind of goes back to the original reason for, at least for Nyle Steiner, to develop his EVI and EWI. He was using them, his own invention, these instruments, in Hollywood studios for soundtracks of movies. And again, I did a tribute page to Nyle Steiner. If you type out Nyle, Nyle Steiner, Steiner homepage, let's say, you'll see his page, and I have lists of these just unbelievable list of movies that he played on, and Apocalypse Now, Fatal Attraction,
huge films, huge titles,
big films, and also television shows and recordings, albums and CDs. So that's just so he was able to provide these instruments, being one musician, to a composer in the studio and say, okay, I can play the flute sound, or a synthetic sound, or if you want an Indian flute kind of thing or something. and he was able to provide that with one musician. So that was one of the original reasons is to provide more alternatives to prospective employers, as I had mentioned.
A lot of people take up a wind synth because they can practice quietly, right, or silently.
Absolutely. Yep. That's a big reason. I know in Japan, it's a kind of a bigger deal because I know their quarters are a little bit closer there than maybe,
Yeah,
the US or,
more people in apartments and things, I guess.
yeah. Yeah. So a lot of the wind controllers are quite popular in Japan. I think mainly for that reason is that they can play music quietly and not disturb other people.
Yeah, I mean, I even here I've done a lot of my wind synth practicing at night when everybody else is in bed. I've just put my headphones on, and I can easily play for 2 hours just quietly to myself. And 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll think, well, maybe I should get into bed, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, one of the main reasons I play wind controller that I enjoy now so much is just being able to physically play it. To physically play a trumpet is it's a workout.
It's more demanding on the embouchure, yeah?
Yeah, it's very muscular, and you really have to practice a lot to keep those muscles going. And I just don't have the time for that. I did when I was in college, but more and more, I just want to play music. So now that I've learned how to play the instrument, I can just concentrate on the music and not so much the physical side of it. Of course, I'm still controlling the instrument. You still have to be a musician to play it. It doesn't play itself.
Sure. And we can play, as we said about playing any other instrument, the instrument sound. We can also play from any music, right? Because we can transpose something like an aerophone. We can easily transpose into any key. So
Just
if you want to
turn
buy
a knob.
if you want to buy a piece of flute music or clarinet music or whatever you want, you can start with anything, right?
I would say almost every wind controller has a transpose feature. Some have only certain ones, E flat F, B flat C, but most of them have a chromatic transposition. You can go anywhere you want. You could play a part that's in B or C sharp and just turn it up a half step, and you're playing in C, but you're sounding in C sharp. Or if you want to play an E flat alto part, you just set it to E flat and play the E flat music. I like to play, personally, being a trumpet player. Of course, trumpet's a B flat instrument, but for my whole career, I played in C. So I could just play off a lead sheet with the keyboard player and just stand right next to him.
Sure.
I enjoy that very much.
And the other great thing about it is, of course, when you do take it out and play, boy, do you get asked questions about it. I mean, how many times I've done a concert, and I've been playing kind of big pieces on the saxophone or with my saxophone ensemble. You can pretty much guarantee that the thing that people come up to me and want to know afterwards, what was that thing you played? What was that kind of electronic thing you played? That's the one that gets questions, right? Because I guess people just don't see them so often and they're really intrigued. So you kind of get noticed if you play a wind synth.
Oh yeah, it's a great way to, well, it's a great way for guys to pick up girls, or at least to start a conversation, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I get you every gig. I would say somebody will come up and say, "What is that? It sounds great." Hopefully, they think it sounds good. There's also the people that are just interested in the novelty of it, and I wonder. I hope they like the music.
Yeah.
I'm up here just playing music. To me, it's just an instrument like any other instrument.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an instrument in its own right. I mean, although we have EVI and EWI, and there are similarities with the way that we play those in terms of how it's similar to our acoustic instrument. You have got to treat them like a new instrument. You start off from a place of knowing at least kind of where to put your fingers, but you need to practice it to get the best sound, just like any other instrument, right? You've got to spend time. You're not going to get the best from it.
Absolutely. It's tricky. It's not like having a trumpet in your hand and that's all you need. With the wind controller, you have to have the wind controller. You have to have the right wind controller that has the proper features and designed properly and does what it's supposed to do. Then you have to have good sounds. A lot of the sounds that maybe come with these aren't as good as they could be, to put it nicely. And so you need good sounds. You need a proper wind controller. You need to practice on it. Of course, you need an amplifier. Some wind controllers have a small speaker built in, but they're usually very small, maybe an inch or two. So you need to have a nice sounding amplifier because that's part of the instrument as well. That's essentially the acoustic bell of an instrument. So the amplifier is as important as the sounds also.
And that probably leads us quite nicely into, we said we'd talk maybe just briefly as a kind of last topic here about breath control. And, I know for both of us, one of our pet things is to kind of reinforce this idea that we need to be aware of how the breath control should be used to get the best possible outcome from all the sounds, how it changes the sounds that we play depending on how much air you push through, and also the articulation that you use. Because, on some of these sounds, on particularly on the Aerophone, if you start the sound with a tongued action, you get a very different sound out of that to if you do a breath start on the sound. And of course, as you push harder and crescendo on the sound, you're going to be opening up filters or affecting the sound and modulating in some way. So I think we both kind of feel that we do hear sounds sometimes played on the Aerophone or a wind synth where perhaps people have ended up tending to play everything kind of really loud. And then the question is, well, maybe you could just do that on a keyboard. You're not really taking full advantage of the great thing about a wind controller, which has got that infinite amount of breath control, right? That's what we should be really concentrating on.
Right. It's easy enough to play a wind controller really badly and to make it sound bad. Any good player and many bad players can easily do that. So, yeah, it's easy to play and blow really hard all the time, or have the settings wrong, or have a sound that's not responsive to breath. And play it, and it's not going to sound very much different than a keyboard player playing it on a little, inexpensive keyboard. So part of what I had said, having a system, is the wind controller, but also the sounds.
Exactly.
The sounds are critical. The sounds, which is something I have always specialized in, creating sounds that people could use in their synthesizers that respond properly to breath, with a range of super quiet to no sound and super quiet and dark, to blowing harder where it gets louder and brighter and more edgy.
Yes.
And then you'll feel like you have response.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you just blow into a wind controller and just super hard, any sound, even if it's responsive to breath, will sound horrible because there's no variation there. And yeah, good wind controllers, just since this is our first episode, maybe we should explain that a good wind controller will have a breath sensor in it that responds to your blowing. Mm-hmm. And then a good one will also have some kind of a bite sensor for the jaw or for the lips.
Yes.
That usually is attached to like a pitch.
Yes.
Pitch sensing. So you can bend a note up and down. You could do a vibrato. So you've got two sensors in the mouthpiece. Some even have three. There's some that have like the Berglund and the Berglund New Rad and New EVI have a lip sensor, which was actually designed by Nyle Steiner back in the 90s.
Right.
I actually worked with Nyle and helped kind of figure out a way to access that sensor. He actually built what he calls an extra controller sensor in his EVI, which is essentially an embouchure sensor, but we had to figure out a way to, how do you access that embouchure controller? So we made a little brass piece of metal that kind of bends a certain way, and if you tilt your head or if you push the mouthpiece a little further into your mouth, it'll touch the upper lip. And the more it touches the upper lip, the more signal it puts out. And that signal could be a growl, or it could be a vibrato. You probably wouldn't do vibrato because you're going to be doing that with bite, or some other method. But usually I like to assign it to growl. So some of the sounds in the VL70 Turbo upgrade chip that I did for the Yamaha VL70 are assigned to growl. And so you press it against your lip and you get that nice expressive growl, in addition to bending and vibrato and breath.
Great.
So there's three sensors in that mouthpiece.
Yeah.
So that's the mouthpiece. And then on the hands, there can be sensors. The Aerophone AE30 has a right-hand pressure sensor under the right-hand thumb. It's when you're holding the instrument, if you press into it a little bit, it's a little rubberized pressure sensor. You can add a controller, and it could be anything. You can assign it to, again, vibrato or growl or
multiple things.
panning or reverb level, whatever. It's completely programmable. Times way more than you'll ever need. So there's a sensor there, and there's also on the EWI series, there's bend sensors for the right hand thumb that you press your thumb against one of the sensors, the pitch will bend down. If you press it against the other one, it'll go up. And on the tip of the thumb, there's a sensor for portamento. So if you touch it, the more you touch it, the slower the glide is from a note to another note. It became the left hand on later models of the EWI. So starting with the EWI 4000, 5000, and the EWI Solo, all have it on the left-hand thumb tip.
Left thumb, yes.
And again, another thing I should mention is the Roland Aerophone AE30 has an actual sensing of the body of the instrument, so you can tilt it to the left.
Motion
sensor, yeah. So you can tilt it to the left, and you could have a MIDI one control going to the left. You can have one going to the right that's different from the left, or they could be the same. And then there's one for height. As you lift the instrument up above the horizon, or just towards upwards, you can send another controller. So there's actually 3 controllers just based on the physical angle of the instrument on the Aerophone. There's tremendous amount of versatility in these things.
Yes. And I mean, I know, I do the ISAX Academy stuff. I mean, that's why I did the advanced course that I do, because there's so much in that instrument to try and understand. And all of those controllers that you've just mentioned, most of them can control multiple things simultaneously as well, can't they? So there's a huge amount of stuff to learn and really get the best from the instrument. Just going back to the breath control issue, so just tying in with what you said, Matt, about, really important to have a good speaker system so you can hear yourself properly. Because if you don't hear yourself properly, you're more likely to blow too hard, right? Because you're just trying to hear yourself. And then the other thing for me is that I find I pretty much have to take each instrument as like a new instrument. If you're really going to get the best from each sound, you've got to practice it as if it's an individual instrument.
Absolutely.
What does it play like when it blows soft? How does it play when you attack the sound? What is it like when you blow really hard? What kind of other controls have been included? Has it got a harmony? Has it got a modulation sound in there? Has it got any kind of portamento sound? So really, it's almost as if every sound that we play, you have to practice as a separate instrument if you fully want to get out of it what you can. And it's great fun, but you got to practice.
Oh, absolutely. There's different reasons to play wind controllers, as we mentioned. Some people want to sound synthetic, and they don't want to sound like an acoustic instrument and emulate an acoustic instrument, which is fine. You can play a synthetic sound, and it can be very non-responsive if you want, just have kind of a real straight sound. And sometimes that's appropriate for the music. But on the other hand, some people want to emulate a clarinet as well as you can possibly do it.
Yes.
So there's no wrong or right to this. And a lot of people will argue about it and get angry. You shouldn't be emulating a clarinet with that. Just play a real clarinet. Well, I'm a trumpet player and I need to play a clarinet sound.
Yeah.
Or I as a trumpet player in my jazz trio, I always wanted to sound like Michael Brecker or Stan Getz or somebody.
Sure. Yeah.
And because I love the sound of a jazz sax. And I just want to have that sound in my music.
Yes.
And I'm a trumpet player, but this allows me to approach the sound of a sax. I don't know if you'll fool anybody, even with the very best emulations, although I think you can get pretty darn close.
In the right blend with the right blend of instruments, you can get pretty close now. Yeah,
so there's a whole thing there is, should you emulate? And if you do want to emulate, those are the hardest sounds to do, because it's like painting. If you want to paint your mother's face or something, or somebody who everybody knows, the president's face or whatever. Everybody knows exactly what that face looks like.
Yes.
So if you're off by a little bit, it's like, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if you're trying to do just a synth sound, there's really no model there, and anything sounds good. So the hardest thing is to emulate and do a good emulation.
Yeah.
And again, to what you're saying, if you're going to emulate, then you have to study what those instruments can do. You need to know what the range is.
Yes.
What's the normal range they play in? What types of cliched phrases do they play,
Yep.
and note combinations.
How do they articulate? Yeah. All of those things.
If you're playing a harmonica sound, there's a certain way you would play, like you jumping around an arpeggio, as they, how they slide their lips across the harmonica. That's an arpeggio,
Yes.
Whereas if you're playing a violin, you're going to have lots of vibrato. You're going to have glide in between the notes a lot of times, a smooth transition.
Yeah.
Guitars are going to play a lot of, hammer-ons and slides and things like that. So you have to know when to tongue and when to slur.
Sure.
So every instrument has its own set of parameters that you want to understand if you really want to do it right.
Absolutely. So I think we've probably covered quite a little bit there for our first podcast. What we thought we would do is also include at the end of each one maybe something to send our listeners away. Go listen to this track because this is something that's inspired us in some way. So, my track, we're going to call it track of the month, right? So my track of the month is actually Eli Benacot. So he did an album called Hybrid Connections. And the track I'm suggesting you might go listen to is actually Hybrid. That's the name of the track. I think you know of Eli, right, Matt?
Oh, he's a great guy, great player. Yeah.
Lovely player. And the thing I wanted to just kind of emphasize here, if you listen to his way of articulating, he plays pretty much all kind of synthesized sounds. But if you listen to the amount of expression that he gets out of his way of playing, it's really inspirational for me. He also he's got a really clever way of interacting on that album. Sometimes he'll be playing a lead line, but then it's with a guitarist. And, Eli will change over to being kind of the bass player for a little while the guitar plays. And of course, that's another great thing about the wind synth. You've got like 8-octave range. So if you want to play something up top, you can do. But if you want to become the bass player, you can also do that. Have a listen to that Eli Benacot recording. It's amazing. I just love his sound on that. And the whole album is great. How about you, Matt? You got one to recommend?
Well, I guess I'm going to go with the kind of the classic quintessential Iwi solo. It seems like everybody kind of points to this video. It's Michael Brecker playing his Iwi. I'm not sure what year it is. I would say maybe early 90s. Not sure. But it's called Michael Brecker Plays Iwi, E-W-I. Uh-huh. And it's on YouTube if you want to check it out. There's about 554,000 views on it right now. But it's a classic where he's actually playing the heck out of the instrument and he's looping. Yeah. He's using a floor looper, which is basically a recorder that just kind of loops around 2 bars or 4 bars continuously.
Yep.
And you can layer different sounds. He changes sounds as a loop is going on. He'll change sounds and he'll play another instrument part on top of that. Then he'll play a second part that's in harmony with the one he just did.
Yeah.
And then he'll start a whole new loop and then he'll go back and forth between the loops.
It's
and
crazy.
Then he'll improvise over the loop.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but Michael Brecker Plays Iwi. Check that one out and you'll get an idea of the absolute amazing potential of a wind controller.
Phenomenal video to watch. That is absolutely incredible.
And there's many more too by him on YouTube. Just check out Michael Brecker Iwi, and he's the master.
Yes,
phenomenal player. If you're into this, you'll love it. Steps Ahead, the things he played with Steps Ahead are fantastic too.
So everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this, our first podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you find it's useful, and I hope you'll join us again next time. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And you can find me online. There's a YouTube channel, which is the Aerophone Academy YouTube channel, and you'll find me on the website, which is www.isax.academy. And Matt, where do we find you?
I guess the best place is just patchmanmusic.com. And you can start from there. I've got links. There's a section at the top where it says wind controller links, and that'll get you going. Yeah. And also we have a nice forum on the website too. If you want to learn about wind controllers, you should mention your forum as well. But I have one on my website. It's called Wind Controller Forum. And you go up there, just start an account, and it's been up there for many, many years. All kinds of great information.
Yes. Brilliant. Okay. I think we'll sign off and we'll say goodbye. We'll see you next time.
Looking forward to next month.
See you then, Matt. Bye.
Bye-bye.